Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols plus a PlayStation podcast supplement. This is episode unknown because we're putting this up in the future. I have no idea when it's going live. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined today by my son, Dustin Furman, executive producer of Last Stand Media. We're recording on a weekend. I'm pretty tired, actually. I probably look it. Just really engaged in the game we're about to talk about, but also doing other things. So trying to stack up some holiday content. I think this will be a key piece of holiday content, although not very timely considering when the game came out. But Dustin, nonetheless, thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I'm doing well. We're just kind of getting back into the swing of things here at the Furman house. My parents are coming in for Thanksgiving tomorrow. We're recording this on November 20th. And so they're coming in and are going to be here for the week, which is exciting. Some people, maybe don't want their parents in the house for multiple days, but I have a pretty good relationship with them. So it's exciting when they come. It feels like a little bonus. We'll be able to hang out and do whatever. But
cool, man.
Just getting ready for Thanksgiving.
Right on. Very good. Yeah, nothing new to report here as well. I mean, today on Sacred Symbols Plus is we like to do our Spoilercast and review discussions from time to time. Today's episode is going to be dedicated to Doki-Doki Literature Club Plus. Now, Doki-Doki Literature Club came out on PC, I think, as a free-to-play game in 2017, but it wasn't until 4 years later in the summer of 2021 that it came to console, and it's on PS4 and PS5 as well as other places. I played it on PlayStation 5. I had never really, I don't think, even heard of it, or maybe heard about it in passing on PC. And then when it came to, or was coming to PS5, Dustin, I was intrigued. I was like, what is this game? I'm obviously, as we've already declared on the regular episodes of Sacred Symbols, weeb adjacent. I'm not put off by weebishness. Too much weebishness is a bad thing, of course. Sure. But that's not a turnoff to me. And so I was reading a little bit about it, and I was like, oh, there seems to be more to this game. Like, this is a game that's catching a lot of people's attention. Then I realized, oh, it's been played by hundreds of thousands of people, et cetera, and so on. As I understand it, you have a better familiarity with it going further back. Am I correct in this regard? Okay. So talk to me about when you played it the first time.
Yeah, I played it back in 2017. It's weird because actually 2017 was the last year that I was in Holly and I's first apartment. And so I remember playing it at my PC in that place. It's just interesting. That's probably one of the last games I played there. But yeah, I remember then it was a little, I want to say the secret was still somewhat well kept at the time, other than like people were saying, you have to check this out, even if you don't like visual novels. And back then I was like, man, what's going on with this game? Seems to be some kind of hype around it. It's got these weird warnings at the beginning. And I remember being very intrigued because it doesn't really let its secret out for a little while. You kind of gotta ride with it, which we'll get into this more. But I was jokingly thinking the term that this game is like the Tarantino of visual novels, because there's like all of this buildup and something is coming, and then when it does, it just all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience because I would argue, so I go out of my way to not read subjective analyses of games. Whenever I very rarely do I do that. In other words, I'm not really looking at what people in this regard are saying about Doki-Doki Literature Club. I don't know what people's interpretations of its themes are in all of this, but it is interesting that people, and you said it too, people are like, well, the twist, what, and I'm like, but there's a lot more to this game than that. And sure. I have to say, and I think this is maybe it'll shock people. Maybe it's not. This is like one of my favorite games of the year. This game is awesome, and I think it's really deep. I don't actually even know if I'm understanding how deep it is from my own just playing of it, and I'm really I like how well, I mean, it's a spoiler cast and a review discussion, so we're going to spoil the game, obviously, talking about this game, so you can duck out now, like right now. But Sayori's suicide in it, hanging herself, is like the twist.
Right.
But then it turns out that maybe this is all just happening on a series of virtual machines, and it's like an experiment and some rogue AI, and it's just very weird. It's like a very weird and very mysterious and very deep game that kept me incredibly engaged with it. And, Gremlin wrote into us on Patreon. Of course, you guys are listening to this on Patreon. If you're listening to it when we released it, it'll come out later for everyone. But you can, of course, submit your inquiries to our shows. And Gremlin says, hey, gang, the visual novel genre is very niche here in the West and not as much liked by traditional gamers. So I'm curious as to what inspired you to try out Doki-Doki Literature Club, and would you be open to playing more longer VNs in the future? Thanks for all the great content. Dustin, you and I had talked about this a little bit on Sacred Symbols, but we interact with not even visual novels per se, but like adventure games, mystery games, detective games. They're all kind of the same to me in some way. Visual novels are actually like the basest and maybe, no offense, the lamest of these things, because it really is just pressing X over and over again, as opposed to interacting with a scene, or even hidden object games and shit like that are more interesting in that regard. But I'm not opposed to playing visual novels. In some way, I consider some of the games that I like on the periphery to be visual novel-esque. I think Danganronpa is a good example of that. But no, I wasn't put off by it. But I wouldn't have played this if I didn't know that there was some sort of twist, which is why I think it's so important that they let you know that. But I think they were a little overbearing with it. I want to talk about that too. What is your play on visual novels? Are you into them otherwise?
I don't seek them out, but I have played quite a few that have made themselves apparent as something I would be interested in. I was actually trying to think of what the first visual novel I would have played is. It may have been Danganronpa, but I'm wondering if like the visual novel purists wouldn't consider Danganronpa to be... It is a visual novel, no doubt, but it includes its own gameplay mechanics when it comes to the clash trial, right? So when it comes to pure visual novels that are simply interactive books, I really don't know if I've played any, because the only other one would have been Zero Escape as well. And Ace Attorney has some light gameplay mechanics too, but they do every once in a while jump out at me and seem like something I would be interested in, but I'm not going in and seeking them out. And mainly just because I don't mean any offense by this, but a lot of them are these cookie cutter dating sim type, very cliche, very driven by genre norms, stuff like that. And I just would rather not read that, or probably even watch it. I would maybe watch an anime with some of that stuff, but I don't know. Visual novels to me are inherently boring by nature. And I don't mean that, it's just not for me. For me, they are boring. It's unless they, like I said, there's some kind of hook or some reason to really go out and check them out, that I will do so.
Yeah, there's games that I liked, like it's like game Valhalla. That was a bartending game that was a visual novel. But the none of these games, like you've mentioned some of them that I enjoy too, none of them I consider visual novels per se. Like I became aware of what a visual novel really was when I covered PlayStation at IGN, heading up PlayStation content on PS3 and Vita at the time. There were visual novels coming to these, especially to Vita. And so I was trying to pay attention more to them, but yeah, I'm not really lured into them either. I have to say that I think Doki-Doki Literature Club, this Team Salvato, Dan Salvato, I think he's lampooning visual novels. And I don't know that this game actually shows a lot of respect to visual novels. It's taking advantage of those cliches to get deeper. And like you said, the water is deeper than you think. So you have to swim and swim and swim and swim until you actually break the visual novel mold. And right. I think it's totally worth it. Now, it's structured around your play as a protagonist, a male protagonist who you name. I named him Colin in my many playthroughs. And you encounter these 4 women. And I call them women because the game makes it clear they're over 18 years old. That's what the game claims. They're over 18 years old. So these are remedial high school students, I guess, 19 years old or older. They don't look 18 or 19, but that's fine. And Sayori, Monika, Yuri, and Natsuki are the four girls. And each of them has their own personality, and I think also invokes and encompasses certain themes and certain foibles. I think Natsuki is all about abuse, and Yuri is all about self-harm. And there's a lot of like interesting things, especially in the side stories, which we'll talk about in a little while. But at the very top, I wanted to go back when you're meeting these girls. I feel like maybe the game goes a little too far in setting the seeds that something's wrong. And I wanted to talk about that. Crave Snow wrote in, said, "Good day, lady and or gentleman. When's Micah making her debut?" She'll be making her well, it's already recorded, but Tales of Arise, Spoilercast. And she'll be on the Call of Duty one and a few others. Is there a trigger warning you would have liked to have gone into a game you may be sensitive to? I'm a little sensitive to suicide, but I could have gone in without the warning and been okay. Totally understand that this warning saved some people grief, though. Any game you'd stay away from with any warning, not limited to suicide. No, I mean, here's the thing, Dustin, about this, and this is a significant complaint I have about this game. Maybe the thing the game does the worst is that it warns you too much. It makes it way too much of a show, and it's totally unnecessary. You can't release, maybe it was necessary on the PC version because it was a free-to-play game and all of that, but you can't release a game on PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 or these other platforms without an ESRB rating. In the United States, that ESRB rating is going to have substantial detail about what the game entails. And I think simply saying in the beginning, this game, even something like saying like this game is, I would have said something like this game is rated M. It is not what it seems. That's would have been the warning at the beginning. And then that's it. But they say it over and over and over again, and then you have to accept a thing. You have an option to get spoilers, then it asks you to accept. You understand, and I'm like, yes. And then when you get to the twist, I'm like, this isn't even that bad. No offense, like it's horrible, but you made it. It's like Danganronpa is way darker than this, and they're not Spike Chunsoft's not beating you over the head. So how did you feel about that? Did that resonate with you at all? Because I just couldn't help but be a little annoyed by it. I'm like, guys, I get it, but you're kind of ruining it by telling me this.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you in that the original PC version was a free download. It wasn't even on Steam. And so I might be wrong, but in my memory, the warning was more minimal in the original PC version. It basically said something along the lines of, this game contains suicide, accept, or whatever, right? And they really go above and beyond on the PlayStation version to give you the options, like you said, to go and spoil specifically what happens, which, like you said, there's an ESRB rating on this version. And so to me, that would be enough. And I actually really like what you said as far as this game's rated M. Please note the mature rating of this title.
Right. Something that's all you have to say. That's all you have to say, in my opinion. Because it says, like, if you want to do your due diligence, now this is not a popular thing to do because, people have to do some work. And I'm not making fun of people out there, but other people that might have been like dying on their cross when they realize, for instance, that Yuri stabs herself in the stomach. The rating on ESRB says this is a visual novel in which players assume a role of a high school student who joins a school's literature club. Blah, blah, blah. As players progress through the story, they can interact with one of four female students making various dialogue choices, including dark thematic elements and instances of violence. A girl depicted with red cutting marks on her arm, a girl hanging from a rope, a character stabbing herself. Like, it says it. So go do it yourself. I don't. Yeah. So I'm a little, as I understand it, this was inspired by other games that are doing heavy content warnings, but I think that they did their game a disservice because I think it would have hit even harder. Because I was expecting somewhat, what my expectation was? Here's what I want to ask you this, Dustin.
Sure.
What was your expectation, if you remember going in the first time, about what was going to happen? Because you knew something was going to happen. My assumption was that Sayori was going to kill the other girls. That was what I thought was going to happen. And I was pretty confident as the game was going forward. I was like, oh, Sayori's totally going to murder these chicks. And right. When you have that scene outside of the house after you help either Yuri or Natsuki at your home, and then you go in for the kiss, and then she shows up. It's like, this was when I was like, oh, okay, this shit's about to go off.
Right.
And so I didn't actually think that Sayori was going to kill herself. I don't know. I just wasn't paying that close attention, maybe, or it was maybe as unexpected as it is claimed. But what did you think was going to happen?
I think that my assumptions were on along the same lines as yours, and I think that just comes from established tropes in these types of games. Maybe our background specifically playing games like Danganronpa, which has high school students killing each other, that it seems like an obvious idea to have a visual novel where nothing seems to be amiss other than a warning, and then it turns into something like a Danganronpa where you have students killing each other and suicide or whatever. But it never crossed my mind that it would be such a fourth wall breaking game at the time, and I think that that's what's so special about it. But yeah, I'm trying to think really what I expected. I know that I think I was expecting it to be very scary at the time, because I remember people on Twitter saying things along the lines of, "This game is horrifying. Don't play it alone," stuff like that. Which I think they were overhyping it.
That's totally dramatic. No offense.
Yeah,
totally dramatic. But you brought up the fourth wall. We should talk about this. Takoyaki wrote in, said, "Hey guys, what do y'all think of the intense fourth wall breaking in this game? The hardcore ambition of Monika constantly going after you, even if it meant literally ripping the game apart, was just immaculate to me. As a Japanese weeb, I was absolutely astounded at the story of the game, and even more so when I learned that the game was made by a Western developer. Love you all, and keep the Weebcast coming." We will. Thank you, Takoyaki, for writing in all the way from the Great East. Or you're saying you're a Japanese weeb, so maybe you are Japanese, European, Japanese American. I have no idea. Let's just assume you're in Japan. And by the way, one time when I went to Tokyo, someone recognized me, which is something I never thought I would, just as some fan. And I was like, we have people that, why are you listening to me? You have way cooler shit here. But anyway, the fourth wall, this is a sacred thing in fiction. And when you breach it, it has to be done very well and with intent, or you can totally lose control. And the game necessarily breaks the fourth wall because it has to. But I think that that's where the game actually gets incredibly deep. And I'm wondering how you feel about that as well, because that's when the game becomes meta. And then I still don't really quite understand what's even going on. As I understand it, the plus version adds some things that are not even in the original version, like emails and all this stuff that are from like this. And I've read them. They unlock every 5% as you unlock things in the game. So I'm at like 90% or something in the game. And it's about people talking about virtual machines and how they're getting out of control and all of this. So there's like 3 layers to the game for me. It's like the layer of the visual novel and the peripheral kind of high school girl thing. Then there's the whole emotional meta level that you think is the meta level. And then there's the whole level where it's not even real. That's how I interpret it. So what did you think about all of this fourth wall breaking stuff?
You mentioned how the PS4 version adds the virtual machine layer to it, because that was one of the coolest things about the original PC version was, in order to get rid of Monika at the end, you have to go into the game's actual files on your PC and delete the Monika file. And obviously you're not able to do a file search like that on a console. So it was a really clever idea how they figured that out. And what's funny is when I was playing on the PlayStation 5 version, initially when I started it, I played through almost the entire game without realizing they added the virtual machine level. And I kept thinking, how are they going to do this? Like, I don't know how it's even going to be possible unless they change the story. And then when I think I just happened to hit the exit at the beginning, just like thinking, what is this going to do? And that's when I discovered that whole outer layer of the game. And yeah, they definitely added some lore as far as what's going on with Monika and the AI and stuff like that. And I'm not sure really if I understand that fully either, but it was a neat, interesting way that they did that. And I always love, overall, when it comes to fourth wall breaks, I absolutely love it when a game does it right. And I think what you said is important, is that it can go too far and either be stupid or dumb, whatever. And I think this game handled it really well, and it's so core to the story. The idea of game files being part of the story itself, which I won't reveal it here, but there's some of this in Undertale as well in the original PC version. The game remembers your previous saves, almost like the sins of the past, and will bring up things that you did. Even though that save's long gone and deleted, the game remembers. And so this kind of has a little bit of that flavor to it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, like a little bit of eeriness, a little bit of a possession.
It's almost like Eternal Darkness, right? Like bringing in that extra level. Not quite, but, messing with your TV. It's messing with your game files, kind of like that.
Silicon Knights. So I feel like the fourth wall, breaking it, is dangerous just in that I don't think you can undo it. And sometimes it doesn't happen intentionally. Like, I think a really famous fourth wall break was when there was a Starbucks cup in Game of Thrones, right? In the scene, and they had to go and edit it out or whatever, remove it. Like that, they weren't trying to break the fourth wall, just did it. They broke the fourth wall because now you're like, oh, there was someone on that set with a fucking Starbucks cup. So we're not really in whatever fucking nerdy ass place we're in right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important that when you're doing it with an intent, and then you bust through it, unless it's like a satire or a comedy. I mean, it doesn't matter in that regard. And so once they've committed to it, I think the way I was interpreting the emails and all the extra stuff was that this is all a rogue virtual machine, like a rogue AI. Monika is injecting herself over and over into the stuff, and you have to, like you said, delete her, which is from the original game as well. But then you realize that they're interacting in ways that they're not even expecting in this email chain. So like, there's something, I don't know. It's cool. I don't quite understand it, but I think it's pretty neat. And maybe with like the few percent things that I haven't done yet in the game, maybe there's an answer there that I haven't discovered yet. There's another thing here that I don't know if it's in the original one, but it's an important component of this one. It's the side stories. Corbin wrote in and said, "Hey, all, just curious what you thought of the DLC side stories. Even though you had to replay portions of the main game to get them, I thought they were fantastic additions to the game and offered a fresh perspective on the characters. Ended up being my favorite part of the game and a nice contrast to the dark themes of the game." I thought these are really cool as well. I played through all of them this morning, actually. Well, I played through half of them yesterday and then the rest this morning. And I feel like you're right. Like, this is some of the coolest stuff in the game. These side stories act basically as a prequel to the game. The game throws you in with the nameless protagonist as Sayori's neighbor and best friend going to the literature club at school, but we don't really know how. We know that this is a small group of girls, but we don't know how they really met. And so this shows how Sayori and Monika meet, and then Yuri comes in, and then Natsuki comes in. And what's cool, and I actually counted, was that each story includes each permutation of each girl the same amount of time. So each girl is focused on pretty much the same amount. So they each get a similar amount of development, and you discover some fucked up things, although they intimate this stuff in the main story. Like you discover Yuri self-harms, obviously, right? Natsuki has an abusive father. That's like a major theme in the game, I think, if you read between the lines and all the rest. And what's funny in all of this is that you don't learn a whole lot about Monika, and that's because Monika is just the rogue, like obsessive AI or whatever. Did you play around with any of these side stories, and did you enjoy them? I really enjoyed them as just a prequel, like really getting it. I couldn't even imagine walking away from this game actually not having played that. It's almost like Burial at Sea for BioShock or something. Like you need it. You know?
Interesting. I played through them this morning, actually. It's funny, you texted me about some more time and mentioned those, and I thought, damn it, I meant to play through those. So I thought maybe I'd get halfway through them or whatever just to be able to talk about it, but I was able to get through 6, which apparently there's one more.
Yeah, once you do them all, there's like a final one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do the final one because I just did the 6, and I thought they were interesting. They provided some good context to the situation and kind of fleshed out some of the characters. I think maybe I was just too obsessive with this point, thinking about how it was fitting in to the fourth wall breaking narrative. I was thinking, okay, Monica doesn't seem to be self-aware at this point. Maybe it has something to do with when the player character, the protagonist, enters, that when the coding gets fucked up or whatever. But if you're more interested in the character, like the actual visual novel aspects, then this definitely fleshes things out for sure.
Yeah, I like it. I just like more texture, and I was kind of paying attention to weird things too, although everything I was thinking was ultimately dispelled. One thing I was thinking as I was playing through some of this was in its clear fakeness in whatever layer it's fake and not happening, is there just no programming in of anyone else? And I kept
Right.
thinking, like, no one mentions anyone else. No one, with the exception of Natsuki mentioning her father, no one mentions their parents. No one mentions their siblings. But then it starts to happen that like Natsuki mentions friends. You actually see like their silhouettes in one of the scenes. And then you hear like they're in the lunchroom and there's a lot of noise and there are people. So that theory ended up not playing true because I was almost hyper focused on this interesting myopic situation in which none of them had any sort of life or meaning or anything outside of those spaces, especially because our protagonist is mysteriously asking the girls, like, why can't we go to your house to do the cupcakes? Why can't we go to your house to make the banners or whatever? It doesn't really make any sense. And so you kind of get to learn a little bit about that too. I don't know. I feel like I feel like I wish I knew more about their intent, or his intent, because it's really written by one person, as far as what he was trying to say. What did you make about the poetry aspect of it, the writing poetry? And I didn't realize in the game, in the files there, and I assume this is true in the PC version, it tells you like what each girl wants to hear or whatever. And I was using a guide online to just guide myself at some point because I wasn't going to start guessing and going back and forth. But this was pretty cool. And I liked this because it gave you a little bit of freedom in the game, but it didn't make you feel like you were playing Mass Effect or anything like that. And I also feel like it's cool because it allowed you to develop at like a relationship, almost dating sim like relationship with the different girls by writing poems that cater to them. But I think the side stories were pretty essential in explaining how they even got to starting writing poetry, because I was questioning that the entire time. I'm like, this is the literature club. Why are we writing poetry? Like, what is it about poetry? What is going on here? But you kind of learn a little bit more about that in the prologue. So what did you make about the whole poetry aspect of it?
I think one of the neatest aspects of it is I think that's how you first could find out that Sayori is depressed, because the words that she likes, and I think this is what the guide said, and it was a good way to put it, is that she likes words that are romantic and sometimes depressive, but not all the depressive words. Usually those can go to Yuri, but some of them can go to Sayori too. And that's something I do remember vividly from the first time I played, is clicking on a word and then being very surprised at that point. So it's an interesting way of doing foreshadowing. And I also like how you said the way that it adds this light dating sim ability, and how if you write certain poems that are geared towards certain girls, I thought it was interesting. At one point, I was writing the poem specifically for Yuri, and Natsuki is eventually just won't even read your poem.
Right.
She's like,
It's
fuck
cute.
that. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't even, I know you're writing this for her. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting too that Monica, who is the girl who seems to have it all together, the president and all of this, is the one that kind of is the least assuming, is the one that kind of goes in for the kill. And Logan does ask the obvious question. He says, let me cut to the chase. Who is the best girl? Feel free to answer honestly, but keep in mind all answers will be reviewed and or edited without your discretion by Monica. Who's your girl?
Initially, it was Yuri, but she gets so freaky and possessive. So I'm going to say at the end of the day, it's Sayori.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Sayori fan. You know, she's into the romance, and I'm a romantic guy. I feel like a romantic guy. Maybe ask Holly, see what she thinks. But
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go with Sayori.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. I would go with Monica, I think, just because she's full on crazy.
Yeah,
So.
I like her too, though. Oh man, the ending. That's how. So maybe we'll get into this, but I'll just ask you now: how long did you just listen to Monica talk at the
Oh, a
end?
long time, because there's
Yeah.
actually a trophy at some point. I didn't even know I was going to get it, but it popped up saying like you've listened to Monica for a long time, and then I was like, oh, it's just never going to end. And then I went online and looked. There's like a repository of everything she says, and it's huge. Like you can sit there for hours and hours, and she'll say new things to you. So yeah, I like that. And then I figured it out when I went to save, and the game's like you can't save, and I was like, oh, all right. So it's a really clever thing. It actually. Well, what did you think about all that? About the ending,
Oh,
the Starscape, and all of this?
I feel like the ending of this game, iconic's not the right word, but when I think of this game, I think of the menu when it says just Monica, and it's just Monica,
Mm,
just Monica.
right.
I freaking love that. I want a shirt that says just Monica on it because I think that moment is so incredibly good. And I I think you're right how it is about visual novels and maybe even somewhat about the people that play them. And I think that that's kind of
Mm.
one of the biggest takeaways is that I don't know, fiction is obviously fake. These characters are fake, but in a visual novel they're often designed for the pleasure, so to say, of the character. And so just taking this little element of, okay, what if they had a small Toy Story like sentience to them and they are driven by this need to please the main character and one of them is a little too crazy. It adds an interesting dynamic. Like maybe the protagonist is the one that's evil. Maybe you're evil, the one that's the type of person that's playing these visual novels that it's just characters created to love the player, and that's it. That's all they're created for, is
Well,
to
that
love you and to date you.
right. That's what I was. That's kind of why I was thinking: is there no family? Is there no parents? Are there no other places? Is that? I agree with you. I think there is something there. Vince Hamill wrote in and said, "Hi gamers, what do you think the game's message was? I see DDLC as one of the strongest uses of satire in gaming. To me, the game is a sharp lampoon of dating mechanics and their homogenous use in gaming. Salvato writes these characters as common archetypes of girls, each single-mindedly trying to woo the player, and in the second half, he simply exaggerates their existing characteristics, highlighting that they are both unrealistic and crazy. The result is explosive and disturbing and hilarious. I think Salvato is respectively poking fun at the absurdity of dating games, as well as the portrayal of women in pop culture. I think you guys are right, and it is a very haunting thing to think about. Not only in the dynamic of like virtual romance and stuff like that, but just anything. This soldier exists in this space for you to shoot and kill, and until then, it's just there. In fact, it invoked a little bit of a wonderful episode of Black Mirror that I love called White Christmas. There's a moment in the game where Monica comes in and is like, "Oh, I forgot, I messed up the time. You must have been so bored or whatever." It reminded me of something that happened, something really haunting that happens in that show, in that episode of the show. And so it is creepy to think that these things just exist for you. These things are just here for you. They're playing the game is a counter game to woo you in. I just did a conversation about mental health and gaming with a therapist, and we were talking about that, about monetization and gaming everything and trophies and achievements and retention. And so I think there is a bit of a lampoon effect here, and I think it's very well done. But I also think that there's a deeper, I don't know if the deeper level that's introduced with the emails and stuff is even necessary, or if it hurts it or hinders whatever. It'd be cool if it like fed into some sort of sequel or some sort of game that also took place in the same world or whatever. But I think you guys are absolutely right in that regard. I did want to bring
Yeah.
up, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, please.
Oh no, yeah. It's just I don't know. I feel like it's especially poignant that this is focused as a visual novel in that we were talking about visual novels that appeal to us earlier and ones that don't. And in particular, this genre is just saturated with these romance stories that are designed to, I don't know, stimulate not necessarily only lonely men and otakus or weebs or whatever, but it's really what they're there for. And some of them can be pretty explicit. And so this game, what I just find funny about it is that a lot of the weeb culture, or whatever you want to say, loves this game. And I'm thinking about it, thinking this is pointed at you, a lot of you. And I don't know, maybe just think about that for a minute, that this game may be, lampooning you and what these games are designed for. And I don't know, that's probably one of the most interesting aspects about it.
Yeah, I totally think you're right. And I don't think any of us are immune.
Yeah.
I think it's just Japaneseized, but it really doesn't have to be because it's focusing on this one thing. It would be interesting. And we have had lampooning of war games and stuff. I think Spec Ops The Line is one of those games. You have to get pretty deep to do that, but it's done nonetheless. And of course, you do it more stupidly, like Max Hazard. We always bring up and stupid shit like that. But and obviously Duke Nukem. But
yeah,
a couple more things I want to talk about. One of the things is the desktop you had brought up and the way the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 versions deal with what was inherently a game that was designed to work with your Linux OS or your Windows OS or your Mac OS in a different way. And so Clark Petrie wrote in and said, I'm so excited for this discussion. I played DDLC when it was originally released on PC and then got the Platinum on PS5 earlier this year. Having experienced both formats, I must say that navigating actual Windows folders and files to delete Monika was a substantially more powerful fourth wall breaking experience than the false desktop on the console version. As someone who only played on PlayStation, did the false desktop still deliver an impactful experience? It was well done, no doubt, but I'd have to think it pales in comparison to actual files on PC, an event which I hold in the same regard as Psycho Mantis for Metal Gear Solid. Cheers, and I'm so happy you got to experience this game. Thank you, Clark, for writing in. You could speak to this better than me because you have played both, but I will say it was interesting, necessary, but also it would have been cool, very difficult, and totally unrealistic. But it would have been cool if it played with the PlayStation in a way where you had to go into your setting. Some games have many saves. Some games have one. Some games have like a save file and then a settings file and all of that. And it would have been cool if they just made a file that said Monika and you had to just go into your settings and delete it and then go back into the game. I know that that's not going to work, but I think that would have been maybe a neater idea. How did you like the use of the PS5's virtual machine and what experience did you think was better?
I agree with Clark that it is significantly less impactful, and it's kind of just the nature of what it has to be when you're playing it on a console, because when you're playing it on console, you're in the OS within the app of the game. And so everything still feels like it's within that bubble. But on the PC version, you exit out to your desktop, which probably has a bunch of, your files or where you play games or whatever. You are outside of the game completely. And then you have to go and root through the files and find it as if it was any other file. And so it is less impactful, but I don't think it ruins it. I think it's still an interesting story, but it just doesn't have that mind bending quality where it's almost like it's almost like it feels like it shouldn't be possible. Like, this isn't how we play games. This isn't what we do in games. And he brought up Psycho Mantis. I think that's a great analogy, just in that you would never think to put your controller into port 2 for Psycho Mantis. And then when it works, it breaks your brain for a second because you've never had to do anything like that. And so Doki-Doki Literature Club probably isn't the first game to do that on PC, but it's definitely probably one of the most popular examples of it happening. In fact, I'd be really curious. Let me know in the comments, anybody, other games that have forced you to mess with the files as part of the storyline. But overall, I think it's fine if you experience on the PS5, but definitely diminished.
I think I just gave a solution to if they remade MGS1 ever, they obviously couldn't do that Psycho Mantis moment again. It just wouldn't work. Everyone knows about it, but also it just wouldn't work anymore because we don't have physical cords controlling anywhere. And I was thinking that would be something they can do is Kojima can make like a file that just pops up during the beginning of the fight, and then you have to like save, go out of the game, like delete this psychic tether or something that he has to you, and then go back into the game. Right. And you'll say, I can't read you. So one last thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap up and go. Ethereal Pizza wrote in about trophies, and I do want to talk about these because I think they're important here. He says, "Hey guys, I'm curious with Colin being a connoisseur of trophy hunting, if you actually chase down the platinum trophy with this game. Obviously, you're all aware of the big twist in the game, but if you actually chase down the platinum trophy, you really begin to see how many cool and hidden machinations are actually buried there. Changing dates and times to unlock Easter eggs and listening to specific songs to unlock things and approaching poems in a certain way to unlock dialogue options. I just found the level of thought and creativity into these unlockables to be very well thought out and clever. What did you guys think? I love this game, and it really left me with a very haunting feeling after completion. Definitely a solid little masterpiece in my view. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Ethereal Pizza." Yes, I agree with you. I'm obviously a trophy fan, so I'm always going to be interested in what the game's trophies are, but I think this game's trophies do a really nice job of encouraging you to see things like writing a perfect poem for each girl, 20 perfect words for each one. You get a trophy for each of those, but that unlocks a ton of dialogue. If you keep doing it over and over again, you keep getting new dialogue choices. And one of the cool things this game does, if you want to play it over and over again, I probably played through it 4 or 5 times all the way through, is there's a skip option that, as long as the game's core save file remembers, because you have to keep restarting, like delete Monika, restart the game, reset it, and over again. But the game has like an umbrella save file that saves everything. And so it remembers what you've done. And so you can skip everything until you get to a new point where that you haven't seen something yet, and then the game stops, and then you can play it there. And then it'll tell you can skip from this point again. And so it does a really nice job of not making it frustrating at these trophies. And I would have never seen a lot of this game if not for the trophies. And I'm excited to go back and just see the few things that I think I'm missing still, which I think is just mostly art and things like that. But as we exit out of this conversation, Dustin, what did you what is your overall thought on Doki-Doki Literature Club Plus?
I think that for, $15, this game is awesome and everyone should check it out. But if you're listening to this, you already have. Maybe not, which you've severely fucked up at this point, because really, what would be the point? But I really appreciate games like this. I always appreciate seeing games that do something completely different and challenge really the notion of what a game can do. This is no doubt one of the very best examples of it. And we need stuff like this in order to keep the medium fresh and exciting. And I think that the praise that this game gets is very well deserved. And I wonder, I haven't really looked into the creator very much, but I'm wondering if he's done anything else, or maybe, has other games in the hopper. I'd love to check him out because I think this game is genius. Well,
as I understand, this game has sold something like 500,000 copies since this Plus version came out. So he's rich. It's not going to be like Concerned 8 Stardew Valley rich, but he's very wealthy. So whatever he's going to do, he's going to, I'm sure, take his time, and rightfully so. My closing comments and exit comments here. This is a great game. Really, really great game. One of my favorite games of 2021, no doubt about it. And highly recommended. It's available everywhere, but of course we are a PlayStation podcast, so it is certainly available PS4 and PS5, but you can play it wherever you feel like you want to. And we recommend it, especially if you are because of the nature of what the game's trying to say. Even if you really cringe at the thought of weebishness and all of that, and I understand some of you do, I would override that. I was saying earlier this year when I was playing Scarlet Nexus, I was like, this is too much. At some point, that game broke me and I didn't even care anymore about the story. I just was trying to beat it and get it over with, because it overwhelmed me with weebishness. But that's not what this game is. So really embrace the weeb here, because I think it's an important factor in wholly understanding in totality what it's trying to say. So check it out. Team Salvados and Serenity Forges as publisher. Doki-Doki Literature Club Plus. Thank you all for submitting your inquiries, of course, to our show. We put the thread out there and you guys answer as usual. We'll have many more of these coming out, many more games to get through, and of course, other episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus as well, our interviews and our conversations and our mailbags, our call-in shows and all the rest. Dustin, do you have any closing comments?
Not really, other than, I don't know, maybe Colin, maybe we should check out more visual novels. Maybe this could open our eyes to new stuff. Or not. Maybe we should never.
Maybe. I like what I like. I like Danganronpa. I still need to play the third one. I like Phoenix Wright. I'm so far behind on Phoenix Wright games. I haven't played like the new ones at all. There's like a whole new series of detectives something or whatever. But I like what I like, but these are games I have to play just once in a while. And I think I've kind of hit my quota this year because, as I said on a recent episode, I platinum Danganronpa, the first one, just to go back and play the whole thing in its totality in like February. And then I played this, and that's good. I'm good now. So we'll see what happens next year, but it has to be something special. It doesn't necessarily, that's the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a commentary, because I really liked Valhalla. That's probably the purest one I've played, where you're just mixing drinks and shit. So yeah, maybe we should. You're right. All right. Let's get the hell out of here. Thank you for your time, Dustin. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.